The words didn't shatter the silence, they poisoned it. Once the heir is born, you will retire to the country. Harry Walker spoke them without raising his voice. No anger, no passion. Just the cold, measured certainty of a man discussing livestock. Rachel Mann sat motionless on the edge of their marriage bed, her hands clasped so tightly in her lap that her knuckles had gone white. The pale blush nightgown she wore, chosen with such care just hours ago, now felt like a shroud. The delicate lace at her throat suddenly seemed to constrict, choking her with its beauty. She had entered this room with hope. Cautious hope, yes, but hope nonetheless. She told herself that marriages built on duty could grow into something warmer, that respect might deepen, that time and patience could bridge the distance between strangers. She had been a fool. Harry stood near the doorway, backlit by the hallway's amber glow. Tall, broad-shouldered, devastatingly handsome in his loosened white shirt and dark trousers. He looked like every girl's fantasy of a duke, powerful, commanding, untouchable. His grey eyes were steady, his jaw set, his posture that of a man delivering a verdict rather than addressing his wife. "I wanted to be clear from the beginning," he continued, his tone as clinical as a physician discussing treatment options. "So there are no misunderstandings later. You will fulfill your duty. I will fulfill mine. Once the succession is secured, you'll have your own estate in the countryside, your own household, your own staff. You'll want for nothing, except you, except acknowledgement, except to be seen as human." Rachel's throat constricted, but she forced her voice to remain level. "And if I refuse this arrangement?" His eyes finally met hers, beautiful, cold, empty as a winter lake. "You won't, because you're intelligent enough to understand what this marriage is." The unspoken word hung between them like a noose. Transaction. In that crystalline moment, Rachel understood three things with devastating clarity. First, her husband didn't see her as a person. He saw her as a function. Second, if she accepted this quietly, if she nodded and smiled and retreated into whatever corner he designated for her, she would cease to exist in any meaningful way. Third, she would not allow that to happen. Something hardened in her chest, not her heart breaking, but her resolve forming. Like carbon compressed into diamond, the pressure of his cruelty was transforming her into something stronger, sharper, unbreakable. If Harry Walker wanted a wife who would disappear, she would give him exactly that. She would disappear into this role so completely, so brilliantly, that he would never be able to dismiss her again. She would build power where he offered none. She would create influence while he looked away. She would become so essential to everyone else that his indifference would be his own isolation. And when he finally looked up from his comfortable detachment and realized what he'd thrown away, it would be far too late. Harry turned toward the door. "Good night, Rachel." The door clicked shut. Silence rushed in like floodwater, drowning everything. Rachel remained perfectly still, her reflection staring back at her from the mirror across the room, dark hair already escaping its pins, dark eyes hollow with something that wasn't quite pain, not yet. Her expression was carefully blank, a mask she would learn to wear so well that even she would sometimes forget what lay beneath it. She rose slowly, smoothing the fabric of her nightgown with steady hands. She wouldn't cry. Not for him, not ever. Instead, she would build an empire he couldn't ignore, and she would make him regret every single word. The marriage had been arranged with the efficiency of a business merger. Rachel Amelia Mann, eldest daughter of Viscount Mann, educated at the finest schools, fluent in 3 languages, accomplished in music and literature, 23 years old. Impeccable lineage, respectable dowry, unblemished reputation. On paper, She was the perfect duchess. Harry James Walker, Duke of Ashford, 31 years old, one of England's wealthiest peers, owner of Ashford Hall and 3 other estates. Impeccable bloodline stretching back 6 generations of dukes. Unmarried, unattached, under tremendous pressure from his family to produce an heir. The negotiations had taken 3 weeks. The courtship, if their 5 stilted conversations and 2 chaperoned walks could be called, that lasted another 2. Harry had been polite but distant. Rachel had been hopeful but realistic. Her parents had been ecstatic. The Manns were old money, but their fortune had been declining for a generation. This marriage elevated them back into the highest circles of power. Her father would regain his seat in Parliament. Her younger brother would attend Oxford without question. Her sister would marry well. And Rachel? Rachel had convinced herself she could make this work. That duty might soften into affection. That a man who chose her must see some value in her beyond her childbearing capacity. She had been spectacularly, devastatingly wrong. Now, alone in her wedding chamber, Rachel moved to the window. Beyond the glass, Ashford Hall's garden stretched into darkness, manicured perfection invisible in the night. But she knew they were there. Tomorrow she would walk those paths as the Duchess of Ashford. She would smile at servants who would judge her. She would navigate a household that had run smoothly without her for decades. She would learn her place in a world that had already decided she was temporary. Rachel pressed her palm against the cool glass. She thought about her mother's advice the morning of the wedding. A wife's power is subtle, darling. Men believe they rule, but a clever woman shapes the world from the shadows. She thought about her sister's teasing. At least he's handsome. Imagine being married to Lord Pemberton with his wandering eye and terrible breath. She thought about her own naive hopes. That marriage might be partnership. That she might matter. The clock on the mantel chimed midnight. Rachel turned away from the window, away from the darkness, away from the girl who had entered this room hours ago believing in possibilities. That girl was gone. In her place stood someone harder, someone calculating, someone who understood that if she wanted respect, she would have to take it. If she wanted power, she would have to build it herself. If she wanted to matter, she would have to make herself indispensable to everyone except the one man who should have valued her most. Rachel climbed into the massive bed alone, as she would be every night of this marriage, and stared at the canopy above her. She would not beg for Harry's attention. She would not plead for his affection. She would simply become so formidable, so essential, so respected that his indifference would be his own failure, not hers. And perhaps, eventually, he would realize what he'd lost. But by then, she would no longer care whether he noticed. Stop right here. If you've ever been told your value has an expiration date, that once you've served your purpose, you can be set aside and forgotten, then you know exactly how Rachel feels in this moment. That cold dismissal, that casual cruelty disguised as practicality, that soul-crushing realization that the person who should cherish you sees you as nothing more than a means to an end. Rachel's about to do something most people only fantasize about. She's going to make him regret it. Every single word. But here's the thing, this story only continues if you're invested enough to see it through. Hit that like button if you're angry on Rachel's behalf. Drop a comment telling me the worst thing someone ever underestimated about you. And subscribe to Duke's Royal Library, because we're about to watch a woman transform humiliation into power, and you won't want to miss a single moment. Don't just watch this story, be part of it. Morning arrived like an unwelcome guest, too bright, too early, too insistent. Rachel woke to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar windows, momentarily disoriented. Then memory crashed back with the weight of a landslide. Her wedding, the reception where she'd smiled until her face ached, the devastating pronouncement that had ended her wedding night. She was the Duchess of Ashford now, and her husband had already written her out of his future. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts, gentle but persistent. "Your Grace?" A young woman's voice, tentative and careful. "May I enter?" Rachel sat up, pulling the sheets around her shoulders instinctively. "Yes, come in." The door opened to reveal a girl of perhaps 20, pretty in a wholesome way, with auburn hair neatly pinned and kind brown eyes that assessed Rachel with barely concealed curiosity. She carried a breakfast tray laden with more food than Rachel could possibly eat: toast, eggs, ham, fruit, tea, chocolate. "Good morning, Your Grace. I'm Mary, your lady's maid." She set the tray on a small table near the window with practiced efficiency. "I hope you slept well?" The polite lie hovered on Rachel's tongue, but she swallowed it. What did it matter? "Well enough, thank you." Mary's hands fluttered nervously as she began opening curtains, straightening already straight items on the dresser, filling the silence with movement. "His Grace asked me to inform you that he departed early this morning for estate business. He expects to return late this evening." Of course he had. Their marriage was less than 12 hours old, and Harry had already fled. Rachel kept her expression neutral, though something bitter twisted in her chest. "I see. Thank you, Mary." The maid hesitated, clearly wanting to say something more, then thought better of it. She curtsied with surprising grace. "If you need anything, Your Grace, anything at all, please ring. I'm here to serve you." The kindness in her voice, genuine, uncomplicated, nearly undid Rachel's composure. She managed a small smile. "I appreciate that, Mary, truly." After Mary left, Rachel approached the breakfast tray without appetite. She forced herself to eat anyway, mechanically chewing toast that tasted like ash, sipping tea that might as well have been water. She needed strength. Physical strength for whatever this day would bring, and mental strength for the battle ahead. Because it would be a battle. Rachel understood that now. She moved to the wardrobe Mary had obviously already organized. Inside hung the gowns from her trousseau, beautiful creations in morning silks and afternoon taffetas, evening satins and walking wools. Each one carefully chosen to reflect her new status. Each one suddenly feeling like a costume for a role she hadn't fully understood she was auditioning for. Rachel selected a day dress in soft, lavender, sophisticated, but not ostentatious, elegant but approachable. If she was going to navigate this household, she needed to be perceived as confident but not threatening, capable but not presumptuous. She would start by learning the architecture of her prison. Ashford Hall was magnificent in the way only centuries-old estates could be: vast, labyrinthine, filled with history and ghosts and the accumulated weight of generations. Rachel spent the morning exploring, noting the locations of key rooms: the formal dining room where she would host dinners, the drawing room where she would receive guests, the library where she might find refuge, the music room with its beautiful pianoforte. She encountered servants everywhere, maids dusting already spotless surfaces, footmen carrying mysterious items up and down stairs, the housekeeper Mrs. Thornton conducting some complex orchestration of household management that Rachel couldn't begin to decipher. Each servant stopped, curtsied or bowed, murmured, "Your Grace," with varying degrees of warmth or wariness. Rachel made a point of learning names, of asking questions, of showing interest in their work. Some responded with surprised pleasure. Others remained guarded, clearly reserving judgment about this new duchess who'd appeared so suddenly. By afternoon, Rachel had a map in her mind, not just of the physical space, but of the social architecture. Mrs. Thornton was the real power in the household, managing everything with iron efficiency. The butler, Mr. Carson, controlled the male servants with quiet authority. The cook, Mrs. Fletcher, ruled the kitchen like a benevolent tyrant, and beneath them, a complex network of alliances and rivalries that Rachel would need to navigate carefully. She took tea in the small drawing room overlooking the gardens, finally allowing herself to sit, to breathe, to think. Harry hadn't returned, hadn't sent a message, hadn't acknowledged her existence beyond the perfunctory instruction to Mary. Fine. If he wanted to pretend she didn't exist, she would use his absence to establish herself. She would make this household hers, not through confrontation, but through competence, through small kindnesses and careful attention, through becoming indispensable to the people who actually ran this estate. She would disappear into the role so thoroughly that she became the role. And Harry Walker would come home to find that his temporary wife had become a permanent fixture. The invitation arrived 3 days after the wedding, delivered on cream-coloured paper with elegant script. Lady Naomi Coles requests the pleasure of the Duchess of Ashford's company for an afternoon garden party. Rachel stared at it, her heart rate picking up. This was it, her first real test in society as a duchess, her first opportunity to establish herself beyond the walls of Ashford Hall. Harry had returned the previous evening, taken dinner in his study, and retired to his chambers without speaking to her. This morning at breakfast, the first meal they'd shared, he'd been polite, distant, treating her like a business acquaintance rather than a wife. When Rachel mentioned the invitation, he'd barely glanced up from his correspondence. Lady Naomi is highly respected. You should attend. Then, after a pause, I have meetings in Parliament tomorrow. You'll go alone. Alone. The word had become the defining feature of her marriage. Now, as Mary helped her dress for the garden party, Rachel studied her reflection with critical eyes. The gown was perfect cream silk with delicate rose embroidery, elegant without being ostentatious. Her dark hair was arranged in soft waves, a few strategic curls framing her face. She looked exactly like what she was supposed to be, a young duchess, polished and proper and utterly respectable. She looked nothing like how she felt inside, terrified, angry, desperately determined. You look beautiful, Your Grace, Mary said softly, adjusting a final pin. Thank you, Mary. Rachel managed a smile that didn't reach her eyes. The carriage ride to Lady Naomi's townhouse felt interminable. Rachel forced herself to breathe slowly, to catalogue what she knew about her hostess. Widowed 10 years ago, no children, immense inherited wealth, known for her sharp intellect and sharper tongue, wielded considerable social influence. A woman who could either become an ally or an enemy, and whose judgment would matter enormously. The garden party was already in full swing when Rachel arrived. Perhaps 40 women spread across an immaculately manicured garden, rose bushes in full bloom, tables draped in white linen, servants circulating with champagne and delicate pastries, pastel gowns everywhere, creating a watercolour effect in the afternoon sunlight. And every single face turned toward Rachel the moment she stepped through the garden gate. The scrutiny was physical, dozens of eyes assessing, judging, dissecting. Rachel felt stripped bare, every imperfection magnified, every weakness exposed. She lifted her chin and walked forward. Your Grace. Lady Naomi appeared, as if summoned. A woman in her late 40s, with silver-threaded dark hair, intelligent grey eyes, and the kind of posture that came from decades of commanding respect. She was handsome rather than beautiful, dressed in elegant burgundy that somehow made everyone else's pastels look insipid. How absolutely delightful that you could join us. Welcome. The warmth in her voice surprised Rachel. Thank you so much for the invitation, Lady Naomi. Your garden is exquisite. How kind. Naomi's eyes sparkled with something that might have been approval. Come, let me introduce you to some people who matter. She linked her arm through Rachel's, a gesture of acceptance that didn't go unnoticed by the watching crowd, and led her toward a table where 2 women sat. This is Alice Campbell, and that's Eleanor Bailey. Ladies, the Duchess of Ashford. Alice Campbell was perhaps 30, with warm hazel eyes and auburn hair, dressed in soft green that complemented her colouring. She smiled immediately, genuine and welcoming. "Your Grace, what a pleasure. Congratulations on your marriage. The Duke is quite the catch." Eleanor Bailey was older, 50 perhaps, with shrewd eyes and a reserved manner. She nodded politely, but didn't smile. "Your Grace." Rachel took the offered seat, accepting champagne from a passing servant. "Please, call me Rachel when we're informal like this. I'm still adjusting to all the formality." It was a calculated risk. Offering familiarity too soon could make her seem presumptuous, but maintaining excessive formality would make her seem aloof. Alice's smile widened. "Rachel, then, and you must call me Alice. Tell us, how are you finding married life? Ashford Hall must be quite overwhelming after— Forgive me, but where did you live before?" "Hampshire, my father's estate near Winchester." Rachel sipped her champagne, grateful for something to do with her hands. "And yes, Ashford Hall is magnificent. I'm still learning my way around. I got lost twice yesterday trying to find the music room." The confession of minor incompetence was deliberate. Women who seemed too perfect too quickly bred resentment. Alice laughed, the sound bright and genuine. "Oh, I got lost in Pembroke Manor for the first month after my marriage. Sebastian finally had a footman follow me around like a guard dog." The conversation flowed more easily after that. Questions about the wedding, beauty, about Harry, polite but distant, though Rachel didn't say that, about her plans, still forming, about estate management and household concerns. Eleanor remained mostly silent, observing with those sharp eyes. After perhaps 20 minutes, Naomi leaned forward slightly. "Rachel, I want to be direct with you, because I believe you can handle directness." Rachel's pulse quickened. "Please. Society has certain expectations for duchesses. You'll be watched constantly, especially in these first months. Every choice you make, every word you speak, every friendship you cultivate will be scrutinized and judged." Naomi's voice was gentle but firm. "But here's what most young women don't understand. Society also has its own power structures, entirely separate from men. If you navigate them well, you can accomplish far more than any duke." "You're talking about influence," Rachel said quietly. "I'm talking about power." Naomi's smile was sharp. "The kind that doesn't require anyone's permission. The kind that's built through relationships, through strategic alliances, through knowing which battles to fight and which to gracefully sidestep." "And you're offering to teach me this?" Rachel couldn't quite keep the hope out of her voice. "I'm offering to consider it." Naomi studied her with those intelligent eyes. "If you prove worth the investment, tell me, Rachel, what do you want from this life? Truly." The question hung in the afternoon air. Rachel could have lied, could have offered the expected answer, to be a good wife, to produce heirs, to fulfill her duty. Instead, she chose honesty. "I want to matter," she said quietly. "I want to build something meaningful. I want to be more than ornamental." The three women exchanged glances, some wordless communication passing between them. Then Naomi smiled, and this time it reached her eyes. "Good. I think we can work with that." By the time Rachel left the garden party 3 hours later, she had accomplished more than she'd dared hope. Invitations to 3 more events, genuine conversation with 12 influential women, and most importantly, Naomi Coles's provisional approval. The carriage ride home felt different, lighter, like she'd passed some invisible test. When she arrived at Ashford Hall, Harry was in the entrance hall, clearly about to depart. "How was the party?" he asked, his tone polite, disinterested. Rachel met his eyes directly. "Successful. Lady Naomi sends her regards." Something flickered across his face, surprise, perhaps that Naomi would bother. Good, he said finally. Then he left. Rachel stood alone in the vast entrance hall, listening to his footsteps fade. She'd survived her first real test, and she was just getting started. 2 weeks into her marriage, Rachel proposed something radical. She'd spent those weeks in careful observation, attending teas and musicales, hosting small gatherings at Ashford Hall, learning the invisible rules that governed their social world. She'd watched how other women wielded influence, how they maneuvered and strategized and built power in spaces men dismissed as trivial, and she'd had an idea. An education fund? Harry looked up from his breakfast, his expression registering mild surprise. For whom? Rachel kept her voice steady, professional. Young women from modest backgrounds, the daughters of tradesmen, clerks, respectable working families, girls who have intellect and ambition but no opportunity to develop either. They were having breakfast together, one of the few times Harry couldn't easily avoid her. He'd established a routine: mechanical politeness in public, complete absence in private. They'd yet to spend an evening together. He'd never returned to her chambers. The rejection should have stopped hurting by now. It hadn't. But Rachel had channeled that hurt into purpose. That's quite ambitious, Harry said, his tone unreadable and potentially controversial. Many believe educating women beyond their station creates discontent. Many believed women shouldn't read at all, not so long ago. Rachel met his eyes directly, refusing to back down. I'm not proposing anything radical, just basic literacy, mathematics, skills that might help them find better employment or manage households more effectively. Harry studied her for a long moment. Why? The question surprised her with its directness. Rachel set down her teacup carefully. Because I had opportunities most women never receive. My father insisted his daughters be educated properly. But I've met dozens of girls who are just as intelligent, just as capable, who'll spend their lives in menial labour because no one gave them an alternative. That seems wasteful. Wasteful, Harry repeated, something almost like amusement flickering across his face. Yes, Rachel refused to look away. Waste of human potential. From a purely pragmatic perspective, better educated women make better employees, better household managers, better mothers. It benefits everyone. It was the argument most likely to appeal to his sense of practicality. She'd learned that much about him. Harry was silent for a moment, then nodded slowly. Who would fund this project? I'd use my personal allowance for initial costs. I've spoken with Lady Naomi Coles and Alice Campbell. Both are interested in serving as patronesses. The Ashford name would attract additional donors, but I wanted your permission before proceeding. She'd phrased it carefully, not as a request for his money, but for his social capital, for his name, which was the one thing he'd given her freely. Harry's jaw tightened slightly, some emotion she couldn't read passing across his features. You don't need my permission for how you spend your allowance. No. But I need your permission to use the ducal name for fundraising. Another long silence. Then, you have it. This is good work, Rachel. Important. The compliment landed unexpectedly, stealing her breath. Thank you, she managed. Harry stood, preparing to leave for whatever mysterious business occupied his days. But he paused at the door, looking back. I mean it, he said quietly. This matters. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise. Then he was gone. Rachel sat alone at the breakfast table, her heart doing something complicated in her chest. It was the first genuine conversation they'd had since their wedding night, the first time he'd looked at her with something other than polite indifference. And it simultaneously gave her hope and broke her heart, because this was what their marriage could have been, this partnership, this mutual respect, this recognition of shared purpose. But he'd already decided she was temporary. So Rachel poured that bittersweet ache into action. Within 3 days, she'd organised a committee meeting at Ashford Hall. Naomi and Alice arrived with 3 other influential women, Lady Margaret Pemberton, Mrs. Caroline Ashworth, and the formidable Dowager Countess of Somerset. They gathered in Rachel's newly claimed morning room, tea and pastries arranged with careful attention. "Thank you all for coming," Rachel began, her voice steadier than she felt. "I know your time is valuable, so I'll be direct. I want to establish an education fund for young women from working families. Not charity in the traditional sense, but investment in literacy, mathematics, practical skills that would allow these girls to pursue better employment or manage their own futures more effectively." "Ambitious," Lady Margaret said, her tone neutral. "How would you select participants?" "Through local parish recommendations initially, girls aged 12 to 16, demonstrating both aptitude and commitment. Small classes, qualified teachers, curriculum focused on practical application." "And the cost?" the Dowager asked sharply. Rachel had prepared detailed projections. Initial establishment costs around £500, securing space, hiring teachers, purchasing materials. Then approximately £200 annually for operational expenses. Naomi leaned forward. "You're proposing we fund this entirely through private donations?" "Yes, I'll contribute £100 from my personal allowance. If each of you could contribute, or help secure contributions from your networks." "I'll contribute £50, Alice interrupted, smiling. "And my husband will match it. He's always saying women need better opportunities." "100 from the Somerset estate," the Dowager said crisply. "If this is managed properly, I won't waste money on poorly executed charity." Rachel's heart soared. "Of course, I'd welcome your oversight." The meeting continued for 2 hours, evolving from skepticism to genuine enthusiasm. By the time the women left, Rachel had secured enough funding to begin a committee of respected patronesses and a timeline for opening the education centre within 3 months. She'd also, she realised, found something she hadn't expected. Purpose. For weeks, she'd been playing a role, performing duchess with skill but without real investment. This was different. This mattered in ways that went beyond social manoeuvring. That evening, Harry appeared at dinner, a rare occurrence. "I heard about your committee meeting," he said as they ate in the formal dining room, separated by 10 feet of polished mahogany. The Dowager is notoriously difficult to impress. "You've done well." Rachel looked up, surprised. "How did you?" Carson told me. "He was impressed by how you organised everything. Apparently the house staff has been taking bets on whether you'd be—" He stopped himself. "Whether I'd be what?" Rachel's voice was quiet. Harry met her eyes, and for the first time, she saw something like regret there. "Whether you'd be like the previous duchesses, ornamental, indifferent to anything beyond fashion and gossip. And what's the consensus?" "That you're different." He paused. "That you actually care." The words hung between them, weighted with everything unsaid. Rachel set down her fork carefully. "Of course I care. This is my life now. Why wouldn't I want to make it meaningful?" Harry's expression did something complicated. He looked like he wanted to say more, but instead just nodded. "Your charity fund I'd like to contribute. Anonymously, £500. Rachel's breath caught. "That's not necessary." "I know, but it's important work, and He stopped, jaw tightening. "I want to support it." "Thank you," Rachel said softly. They finished dinner in silence, but it was a different kind of silence than before. Less hostile, more thoughtful. As they rose to leave, Harry hesitated. "Rachel," she turned back. "I was wrong," he said quietly, "on our wedding night. What I said was cruel." Hope fluttered dangerously in her chest. Then why? Because I'm a coward, he interrupted, his voice rough. Because it's easier to keep distance than risk. He stopped himself again. I just wanted you to know. What you're building matters. You matter. He left before she could respond. Rachel stood alone in the dining room, her hands trembling slightly. He'd apologized. Not fully, not enough, but he'd acknowledged his cruelty. And he'd said she mattered. The hope was dangerous, terrifying. Because if she let herself believe it, if she let herself care about his opinion again, he would have the power to destroy her. But Rachel was beginning to suspect that the damage was already done. She'd spent weeks building walls against him, and he'd just revealed a crack in his own. The first real threat arrived, wrapped in crimson silk. Lady Lola Buckley made her entrance at the Marquess of Somerset's ball like an actress taking the stage, calculated timing, perfect positioning to catch maximum attention. She was beautiful in a way that demanded acknowledgement. Golden hair arranged in elaborate curls, porcelain skin, a figure displayed to advantage in a gown so red it bordered on scandalous. And her eyes, when they found Rachel across the ballroom, glittered with something predatory. Rachel stood near the refreshment table, momentarily separated from Naomi and Alice, who'd been pulled into conversation with Lady Margaret. She'd been enjoying herself her first major ball as a duchess, and it had gone well. Multiple women had complimented her gown, midnight blue silk, that brought out her dark colouring. Several had asked about the education fund, and she'd successfully navigated 3 dances with appropriate partners. She'd almost forgotten to feel self-conscious about attending without Harry. He'd sent apologies to the host, some unspecified business that required his attention. Rachel suspected the truth was simpler. He was avoiding her again, retreating after that moment of vulnerability at dinner. Your Grace! Lola appeared at Rachel's elbow, like smoke materializing. Up close, she was even more stunning, flawless features, expertly applied cosmetics, an air of absolute confidence. I've been so eager to meet you. Everyone's been talking about the new Duchess of Ashford. How kind. Rachel kept her voice pleasant, neutral. I don't believe we've been introduced. Lady Lola Buckley. Oh, but surely Harry's mentioned me. Her smile sharpened. We're old friends. Very old, very close friends. The implication was clear, deliberate. Rachel's stomach tightened, but she refused to show it. I'm afraid my husband and I don't discuss his past acquaintances. How modern. Lola's laugh was light, musical, calculated to carry. Several nearby heads turned. Though I suppose that's wise. The past can be so complicated, can't it? Lady Lola, Rachel said evenly, if you have something to say, I'd prefer directness to innuendo. Lola's eyes widened with mock surprise. My goodness, you are refreshingly blunt. I simply wanted to welcome you to society, Your Grace, and to offer some friendly advice. I'm listening. Harry's a difficult man. Lola's voice dropped to a conspiratorial whisper. Complicated. Damaged, if we're being honest. He's been hurt badly, and he doesn't trust easily. I'd hate to see you invest too much hope in this marriage becoming something it's not designed to be. The words landed like carefully aimed daggers. Rachel felt her composure threaten to crack, felt the truth of those words cut deeper than they should. But years of training in maintaining face held firm. Thank you for your concern, Lady Lola, but I'm quite capable of managing my own marriage. Of course you are. Lola's smile never wavered. I just know how these things work. Harry married you for duty, for an heir. Once that's accomplished, he'll return to his previous life, and you'll be provided for, comfortable, forgotten. She'd somehow learned about Harry's wedding night pronouncement, or at least guessed at its substance. Rachel felt ice spread through her veins. If you'll excuse me, Rachel said, her voice steady through sheer force of will. "I see Lady Naomi trying to catch my attention." She walked away before Lola could respond, before her carefully maintained composure could shatter. She found Naomi immediately, who took one look at Rachel's face and steered her toward a quieter alcove. "What did that viper say to you?" "Nothing important," Rachel lied. "Rachel." Naomi's voice was gentle but firm. "Lola Buckley is poison. Beautiful, well-connected poison, but poison nonetheless. She's been circling Harry for years, and she's jealous that he married someone else. Whatever she said was designed to hurt you. Don't give her that power. She said he married me for duty. That once I produce an heir, I'll be forgotten." The words tumbled out before Rachel could stop them. Naomi's expression hardened. Did Harry tell her that? I don't know. Maybe. Or maybe she just... "Rachel, look at me." Naomi gripped her hands. "Whatever Harry said or didn't say to that woman is irrelevant. What matters is what you build for yourself. Your education fund is already gaining attention. You've impressed people who matter. Don't let Lola Buckley undermine that with pretty words and poisoned implications." Rachel nodded, trying to believe it. "Your Grace." They both turned to find Harry standing at the edge of the alcove, his expression thunderous. "I need to speak with you," he said, his voice tight. "Now." Naomi squeezed Rachel's hand once, then melted away. Harry led Rachel onto the terrace, cooler air, blessed privacy. The music from the ballroom drifted out, muffled and distant. "Did Lola Buckley approach you?" he demanded. Rachel lifted her chin. "Yes." "What did she say?" "Nothing I didn't already know," Rachel replied, proud that her voice remained steady. "That you married me for duty, that I'm temporary, that I shouldn't expect more than a comfortable life and eventual dismissal." Harry's hands clenched into fists. She had no right. "She had every right," Rachel interrupted, "because you told me essentially the same thing on our wedding night. She's just repeating your own words back to me." "That's not..." He stopped, jaw working. "I was wrong. I told you I was wrong. You told me you were cruel. That's not the same as being wrong about your intentions." Rachel felt something breaking open inside her, weeks of careful control shattering. "Tell me honestly, Harry. Did you mean what you said? Once I give you an heir, will you send me away?" He stared at her, and in the lamplight from the terrace, she could see the war happening behind his eyes. "I don't know," he finally said, and the honesty of it was somehow worse than a lie would have been. "When I said those words, I believed them. I thought I could keep this marriage purely transactional, that I could protect myself by maintaining distance. But Rachel, I don't." She held up a hand. "Don't apologize again if you're not actually changing anything. Don't tell me I matter if you still plan to discard me. I'd rather know where I stand than be given false hope." "It's not false," Harry said urgently. "I'm trying, Rachel. I'm trying to." "Trying to what? Overcome your fear long enough to treat me like a person?" How generous. The bitterness in her voice surprised them both. Harry looked stricken. "I know I've hurt you. I know I've been unfair. But Lola Buckley is dangerous, and whatever she said..." "She said exactly what I already knew," Rachel repeated. "She just had the courtesy to be honest about it, instead of hiding behind polite distance." She moved toward the terrace doors, needing to escape before she said something she'd regret. "Rachel, wait." She paused without turning back. "Stay away from Lola," Harry said, his voice urgent. "Please, she's manipulative and cruel, and she'll use anything she can to hurt you, to hurt us." "There is no us," Rachel said quietly. "You made sure of that." She left him standing alone on the terrace. "Let me ask you something. How many times have you tried to prove your worth to someone who'd already decided you were disposable? How many times have you fought for respect from someone who'd rather keep you small?" Rachel's doing what most of us can only dream about. She's building power while he's still counting her days. She's becoming indispensable while he's still treating her like she's temporary. But here's what I need from you. If you're invested in this story, if you want to see Rachel make him regret every cruel word, I need you to actually show it. Hit that like button. Leave a comment telling me what you'd do in Rachel's position. And subscribe to Duke's Royal Library because the next chapters are where everything explodes, and I guarantee you don't want to miss it. Don't just watch Rachel's story be the reason it continues. 3 months into her marriage, Rachel stood in front of a modest building in Clerkenwell and felt something close to joy. The education centre was real, tangible. 20 young women carefully selected from parish recommendations were inside at this very moment, attending their first day of classes. 2 qualified teachers, Miss Catherine Morris and Miss Anne Fletcher, were conducting lessons in literacy and mathematics. The building itself was clean, well lit, properly furnished with desks and materials. It existed. Rachel had built something that mattered. "You should be proud," Naomi said, standing beside her on the street. "This is remarkable, Rachel, truly." "We couldn't have done it without your help," Rachel replied honestly. "Without all the committee's support. Oh, we provided money and names. You provided vision and determination." Naomi smiled. "That's far more valuable." They spent the morning observing classes, meeting students, consulting with teachers. The girls were eager, nervous, grateful in ways that made Rachel's throat tight. Several had walked miles to attend. One had negotiated with her employer to adjust her work schedule. Another had convinced her skeptical father that education was worth the lost income from her labour. "Thank you, Your Grace," a girl named Emma whispered as Rachel spoke with her during a break. She was perhaps 14, thin from insufficient food, but her eyes were bright with intelligence. I never thought, thank you." Rachel gripped her hands gently. "You earned this place, Emma. Now make the most of it." By the time Rachel returned to Ashford Hall that afternoon, she was exhausted and exhilarated in equal measure. Harry was in the entrance hall when she arrived, clearly returning from his own activities. They'd fallen into a pattern of polite avoidance punctuated by occasional forced interactions, breakfasts 2 or 3 times a week, dinner when social obligations demanded it, careful conversations that revealed nothing. Since the confrontation at the ball 2 weeks ago, things had been even more strained. But now Harry looked at her with something like curiosity. The education centre opened today. Yes. Rachel removed her gloves, suddenly self-conscious. "It went well. 20 students, all eager to learn. The teachers are excellent. I'd like to visit, if that's acceptable." The request surprised her. "Of course. You've been generous with your support. You're welcome any time." Something crossed his face, regret, maybe, or longing. "I meant what I said, Rachel. About your work mattering. I know I've been." He stopped, searching for words. "I know I've made everything more difficult than it needed to be. But watching what you've built, the respect you've earned, the genuine difference you're making, I'm proud of you." The words landed with unexpected weight. Rachel felt tears threaten and fought them back. "Thank you." They stood in the entrance hall, 5 feet of expensive carpet between them, feeling like miles. "Rachel." Harry began, then stopped at the sound of voices from the drawing room. Mrs. Thornton appeared, looking apologetic. "Pardon me, Your Grace, but you have visitors. Lady Charlotte Howell and her companion. They insisted they'd been invited, though there's nothing in the appointment book." Rachel saw Harry go absolutely rigid, his face draining of colour. "Charlotte's here?" His voice was barely above a whisper. "Who's Charlotte Howell?" Rachel asked. But Harry was already moving toward the drawing room, his posture radiating tension. Rachel followed, a sense of dread building in her chest. The woman who rose from the settee was beautiful, pale blonde hair, icy blue eyes, a figure displayed in a gown of sophisticated grey. She was perhaps 30, with the kind of refined elegance that came from years of privilege. And when she looked at Harry, her smile was intimate, knowing, cruel. "Harry, darling," she purred, "it's been far too long." Harry's voice when he spoke was absolutely flat. "Charlotte, what are you doing here? Can't an old friend pay a visit? Especially when I heard you'd gotten married." "I simply had to meet the new duchess." Charlotte's gaze shifted to Rachel, assessing and dismissive in a single glance. "How? Charming. She's exactly what I expected." The insult was subtle but unmistakable. Rachel felt something cold settle in her chest. This was the woman Harry had loved, the one who'd betrayed him. The reason he'd built walls around his heart. And from the way Charlotte was looking at him, possessive, confident, she believed she still had some claim on him. "You need to leave," Harry said, his voice still eerily controlled. "Now." "But I've only just arrived." Charlotte's pout was theatrical. "And I haven't properly congratulated your bride. Tell me, Your Grace, are you enjoying married life? Is Harry as attentive as you'd hoped, or has he been distant?" The calculated cruelty in her tone made Rachel's decision for her. She could retreat, could play the wounded wife, could give this woman the satisfaction of knowing she'd drawn blood, or she could fight. Rachel stepped forward, her posture straightening, her voice acquiring the cool authority she'd learned from weeks of managing servants and navigating society. "Lady Howell, how unexpected. Though I'm afraid you've wasted your time, we're not receiving visitors today. My husband and I have a prior engagement." It was a lie, but a useful one. Charlotte's smile faltered slightly. "Oh, but surely you can spare a few minutes." "No," Rachel said simply, "we can't. Mrs. Thornton, please show Lady Howell out." The housekeeper moved forward immediately, relief evident on her face. Charlotte looked between Rachel and Harry, clearly thrown by the dismissal. "Harry, you heard my wife," Harry said, and there was something in his voice that made Charlotte's confident facade crack. "Leave, and don't come back." Charlotte's eyes flashed with fury, but she had no choice. She swept from the room with theatrical dignity, her companions scurrying after her. The moment the door closed, Harry turned to Rachel, his expression raw. "I'm sorry. I had no idea she would." "Who is she?" Rachel asked, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside her. "Really?" Harry sank into a chair, suddenly looking exhausted. "Someone I loved once. Someone who destroyed that love as publicly and humiliatingly as possible." Rachel waited, sensing there was more. "We were engaged," Harry continued, his voice hollow. 5 years ago, I thought I believed she loved me. Then I discovered she was having an affair with my closest friend. When I confronted her, she laughed, said I'd been useful for establishing her reputation, but she'd never actually cared about me, that I was boring, conventional, too serious. The pain in his voice was palpable. The scandal was contained, barely, but the humiliation, I swore I'd never allow anyone that power over me again. Understanding crashed over Rachel like a wave. This was why he'd been so cruel on their wedding night. Why he'd insisted on distance. Why he'd treated their marriage as a transaction. He'd been trying to protect himself from being hurt again. "Harry," Rachel said gently, "I'm not Charlotte. I know." He looked up at her, and his eyes were bright with unshed tears. "I know you're not. You're nothing like her. You're genuine and kind, and you actually care about making a difference in the world. But Rachel, I'm broken. Charlotte broke something in me, and I don't know if I can fix it." Rachel moved closer, crouching in front of his chair so she could meet his eyes directly. "Then let me help you try," she said quietly. "I'm not asking you to fix yourself overnight. I'm not even asking you to love me. But Harry, if you keep pushing me away because you're afraid, we'll both end up alone in this marriage. And that seems like letting Charlotte win." Harry reached out hesitantly, cupping her face with one hand. The touch was gentle, reverent, nothing like the clinical distance of their wedding night. "I don't want her to win," he whispered, "and I don't want to lose you." "Then stop trying to," Rachel said simply. He pulled her closer, and she let herself lean into his embrace for the first time since their wedding. They stayed like that for a long moment, not quite reconciliation, but perhaps the beginning of possibility. Outside, the afternoon light was fading. Inside, something was finally starting to build. The scandal sheet appeared 3 weeks later, and it was devastating. Duchess of Deception. Questions raised about her grace's virtue. The article was a masterpiece of innuendo and carefully phrased accusations. It claimed Rachel had been conducting inappropriate meetings with Oliver Glover, one of the education fund's major donors, that she'd been seen entering a building in Clerkenwell alone with him, that her charitable work was a cover for something far less respectable. Every word was a lie. But lies, Rachel had learned, spread with terrifying speed. Alice burst into Ashford Hall at 9 in the morning, the scandal sheet clutched in her hand, her face pale with fury. "Rachel, you need to see this. It's already circulating everywhere." Rachel read it once, her hands perfectly steady. Then she read it again. "This is Lola Buckley's work," she said quietly. "It has to be." Undoubtedly. Naomi arrived moments later, equally furious. "But Rachel, proving it is one thing, managing the damage is another. We need to act quickly." They spent an hour strategizing who to contact, what evidence to gather, how to counteract the rumors. Rachel provided a complete list of every meeting with Mr. Glover, all of which had been chaperoned either by Alice, by Mary her maid, or by the education centre teachers. "We can document everything," Alice said firmly. "Oliver will be appalled when he hears about this. He'll provide testimony." "But will Harry believe you?" Naomi asked gently. "That's the real question." Rachel's stomach dropped. She'd been so focused on fighting the scandal that she hadn't considered the most important question. Would her own husband believe she was innocent? After years of Charlotte's betrayal, would Harry's first instinct be trust or suspicion? She found him in his study, the scandal sheet already on his desk. He looked up when she entered, and his face was absolutely unreadable. "Is any of this true?" he asked, his voice carefully controlled. And there it was, the question that revealed everything. After weeks of tentative progress, after Charlotte's visit and his vulnerable confession, after that moment when she'd thought they might actually build something real, his first instinct was still doubt. Rachel felt something shatter inside her chest. "No," she said, her voice cold as winter. "None of it is true. But thank you for asking, instead of simply believing me." She turned to leave. "Rachel, wait." "Don't." She didn't look back. "I'll provide whatever evidence you need. Speak to Alice. Speak to Naomi. Speak to Mr. Glover himself. Interview every servant who accompanied me. But I won't stand here and defend myself to the one person who should already know I'm innocent." "That's not fair," Harry said, his voice rising. "After what happened with Charlotte—" "I am not Charlotte," the words exploded from her. "I have never been Charlotte. I have spent 3 months trying to prove that to you, trying to earn your trust, trying to show you that not every woman will betray you. And the first time there's any question, any accusation, you immediately doubt me. I didn't say I doubted you. You asked if it was true, Rachel's voice cracked. You looked at that pack of lies, and your first question was whether I'd been unfaithful. Not who wrote it, not how we fight it. You asked if I was guilty. Harry's face had gone pale. I was trying to understand. You were protecting yourself, Rachel interrupted. Again, always. You're so terrified of being hurt that you can't see what's actually in front of you. A wife who's been faithful, who's tried to be patient with your trauma, who's built something meaningful while you've kept your distance. But none of that matters because Charlotte hurt you 5 years ago, so every woman must be suspect. That's not. It is. Rachel's voice had gone quiet, deadly. And I'm done paying for her sins. I'm done trying to prove I'm worthy of basic trust. I'm done being guilty until proven innocent in my own marriage. She left him standing in his study, her vision blurred with tears she refused to let fall until she reached her chambers. Mary took one look at her face and immediately dismissed herself, leaving Rachel blessedly alone. Rachel collapsed into a chair and finally let herself cry harsh, painful sobs that she'd been holding back for months. She cried for the hope she'd carried into this marriage, for the man she'd thought Harry might become, for the partnership that kept almost existing but never quite materializing. She cried for herself, for the girl who'd believed duty might grow into affection, who'd tried so hard to be patient and understanding and forgiving. That girl was gone. In her place was someone harder, someone who understood that love without trust was just another form of isolation, someone who was done waiting for Harry Walker to decide she was worth believing in. Harry spent 2 days conducting what he called an investigation. Rachel spent those same 2 days in her chambers, refusing all visitors except Naomi and Alice. She didn't cry again after that first breakdown. Instead, something cold and crystalline formed where her heart had been protective armor that she should have built months ago. She wrote letters to every committee member, documenting every meeting, every donation, every interaction with Mr. Glover. She compiled schedules, witness statements, receipts. She built an ironclad case for her own innocence, hating every moment of having to prove what should have been assumed. On the third morning, Harry appeared at her door. Rachel was at her writing desk, dressed in a simple morning gown of dove grey. She didn't look up when he entered. "Rachel," he began. "Your Grace." Her tone was formal, distant the way she might address a stranger. He flinched. "Please don't do that." "Do what?" "Treat you with the same courtesy you've shown me." She finally looked up, and her eyes were empty of everything except polite disinterest. "Have you completed your investigation?" "Yes." Harry moved deeper into the room, but didn't approach her desk. "You were right. All of it was fabricated. Lola Buckley paid 3 witnesses to lie about seeing you and Glover together. She bribed the scandal sheet publisher to print the story. I have signed confessions from 2 of the witnesses. How convenient that you believe me now." The words were sharp enough to draw blood. Harry's jaw tightened. "I'm sorry. I should have believed you immediately. I should have trusted you." "But you didn't." Rachel set down her pen with deliberate care. "The first real test of our marriage, and you failed spectacularly." "I know." "Do you?" She stood, moving to the window so she wouldn't have to look at him. "Do you understand what it felt like? To have worked so hard, to have been so careful, to have built something meaningful, and then to have my own husband look at me like I might be lying? Rachel, please." "I'm tired, Harry." Her voice was hollow, exhausted. "I'm tired of fighting for scraps of trust from the one person whose faith should be unconditional. I'm tired of being punished for Charlotte's sins. I'm tired of loving a man who can't bring himself to believe in me." The confession escaped before she could stop it. Loving. The word hung in the air between them like a grenade. Harry went absolutely still. "You love me?" Rachel laughed bitterly. What do you think all of this has been about? The patience, the understanding, the desperate need to prove myself? I've been trying to make you see me, Harry. Really see me. But you're so determined to protect yourself from being hurt again that you can't recognize what's right in front of you. Harry's voice cracked. I didn't know. Of course you didn't. Because you've been too busy building walls to notice that I've been trying to climb them. She turned to face him finally, and the pain in her eyes was devastating. But I'm done climbing, Harry. I'm done exhausting myself trying to reach someone who keeps moving further away. Harry crossed the room in 3 strides, reaching for her. Rachel, please, if you'll just give me one more chance. To what? Doubt me again the next time someone whispers poison in your ear? She stepped back, avoiding his touch. Words aren't enough anymore. You apologized after our wedding night. You apologized after Charlotte's visit. And now you're apologizing again. But nothing actually changes. It will, Harry said desperately. I swear it will. I've already had Lola Buckley completely ostracized. I've filed suit against the scandal sheet for libel. I've made public statements declaring my absolute faith in your innocence. Rachel, I'm choosing you. Publicly and irreversibly. Actions taken after the fact, Rachel said quietly. After you'd already doubted me. After you'd already asked if I was guilty. Then tell me what I need to do. Harry's voice was raw. Tell me how to fix this. Rachel looked at him, really looked. She saw the fear in his eyes, the genuine remorse, the desperate hope that she might forgive him again. She also saw the pattern that would define their marriage if she let it. His fear would lead to doubt, which would lead to apology, which would last until the next crisis triggered his trauma all over again. She would spend her life proving herself over and over, never quite earning the unconditional trust that should be the foundation of any real partnership. I need time, she said finally. I need you to prove not with words, but with sustained action over weeks and months that you can actually trust me, that you won't crumble the next time someone tries to come between us. And until then, she paused, steadying her voice, until then, we maintain appropriate distance. We fulfill our public duties as Duke and Duchess. But I won't be vulnerable with you right now, Harry. Not when you might use it against me, the next time you're afraid. She saw him absorb the words like blows, saw the way they landed and hurt. Good. He should feel this. Should understand the cost of his doubt. I understand, he said quietly. And Rachel, I will prove it. However long it takes. I'll prove that you can trust me, even if I have to spend the rest of my life doing it. He left without trying to touch her, without pushing for more than she'd offered. Rachel stood alone in her chambers, feeling simultaneously vindicated and devastated. She'd drawn a line, established boundaries, refused to accept less than she deserved. So why did it feel like losing? 6 weeks passed in strange, strained civility. Harry kept his word about public support. He attended every education centre event, contributed additional funding, publicly praised Rachel's work in Parliament. When society whispered about the scandal, he shut it down with icy authority. When Lola Buckley attempted to attend a ball where Rachel would be present, Harry had her removed before she could enter. He was choosing Rachel, visibly, consistently, but the distance between them remained vast. They shared meals occasionally, polite conversations about estate management, charity work, social obligations. They attended events together, playing the role of united Duke and Duchess with practiced skill. They smiled for observers, while maintaining careful, emotional separation in private. Rachel poured herself into the education centre, which was thriving beyond her hopes. Enrollment had doubled. 2 more teachers had been hired. Several graduates had found better employment. The project had become her refuge, her purpose, her proof that she could build something meaningful even in the wreckage of her marriage. But late at night, alone in her chambers, she admitted the truth. She missed him, missed the tentative warmth that had started growing between them, missed the vulnerability he'd shown after Charlotte's visit, missed the possibility of what they might have become if fear hadn't poisoned everything. She was still wrestling with these thoughts when the invitation arrived. A charity gala, hosted by Lady Catherine Somerset. In support of Rachel, read the line twice to be sure she wasn't imagining it. The Clerkenwell Women's Education Initiative. Her own project. Someone was trying to claim credit for her work. This is bold, even for society, Naomi said when Rachel showed her the invitation. Lady Somerset has no connection to your education centre. This is clearly an attempt to undermine me, Rachel finished quietly. To make it seem like the work was hers all along. We need to attend, Alice said firmly. You need to be there to make clear whose project this actually is. Rachel agreed, though the prospect filled her with dread. The gala was held at Somerset House, dripping with wealth and status. Rachel arrived with Harry they'd agreed weeks ago to attend together, before learning what the event actually was. The moment they entered, Rachel understood this was a trap. Lady Catherine Somerset was there, of course, accepting congratulations for her charitable initiative. But standing beside her, beautiful and triumphant, was Charlotte Howell. This wasn't about charity at all. This was Charlotte's final attempt to destroy Rachel and reclaim Harry. This was a mistake, Harry murmured, his hand tightening on Rachel's arm. We should leave. No. Rachel lifted her chin. I won't let her run me off. That's exactly what she wants. They moved deeper into the ballroom, and Rachel felt every eye tracking them. The whispers started immediately speculation about whether the Duke and Duchess's marriage would survive Charlotte's return, whether Harry still loved his former fiancée, whether Rachel was strong enough to keep her husband. Lady Somerset approached with Charlotte in tow, her smile sharp as broken glass. Your Graces, how wonderful you could attend. Lady Charlotte was just telling me about her passion for women's education. Such an admirable cause, don't you think? Indeed, Rachel said coolly, which is why I established the Clerkenwell Centre 3 months ago. Perhaps Lady Charlotte would like to visit sometime and see the actual work being done. Charlotte's smile never wavered. Oh, I've heard all about your little project, Your Grace. How charming that you're keeping yourself occupied. Though I must confess, I'm surprised Harry allows you so much freedom. He was always rather possessive with the women he loved. The implication was clear. Harry had loved Charlotte, but merely tolerated Rachel. Rachel felt Harry tense beside her, felt his anger radiating like heat, but before he could speak, she squeezed his arm once a silent request to let her handle this. How kind of you to reminisce about the past, Lady Charlotte. Though I find dwelling on what's already finished rather pointless. The present is so much more interesting, don't you think? Charlotte's eyes flashed. Some things from the past remain quite present. Old connections, old feelings. They don't simply disappear because someone new enters the picture. You're right, Rachel said, her voice carrying clearly through the surrounding silence. Trauma from past betrayals can linger for years. It takes time to heal from that kind of damage. But Harry's been doing the work of healing, with me, as his wife, as his partner, as the woman he chose not because she manipulated him or used him, but because he wanted to build something real. Charlotte's composure finally cracked. He married you for duty. He married me for many reasons, Rachel interrupted calmly. And what we've built since then is ours, not yours. You had your chance, Lady Charlotte. You destroyed it spectacularly. And now you're here desperately trying to reclaim something that was never really yours to begin with. The ballroom, had gone absolutely silent. Charlotte looked between Rachel and Harry, clearly expecting him to defend her, to show some lingering softness for his former love. Instead, Harry stepped forward, positioning himself slightly in front of Rachel, protective, without being possessive. "Lady Charlotte," he said, his voice carrying the full authority of his title, "you need to understand something. I loved you once, that's true. You destroyed that love through your own cruelty and betrayal. I spent years believing you'd broken something in me that could never be repaired." He turned, looking at Rachel with something raw and vulnerable in his eyes. "But my wife proved me wrong. Rachel showed me that the problem wasn't that I couldn't love, it was that I'd given my love to someone who didn't value it. She's shown me patience and grace I didn't deserve. She's built something meaningful while I've been sorting through my own damage. And she's still here, still trying, despite every reason I've given her to walk away." He looked back at Charlotte, and his expression hardened. "You don't get to take that from me. You don't get to undermine her work or question her place in my life. You had your chance, and you chose to destroy it. Rachel is my wife, my duchess, and if you ever attempt to come between us again, I will make absolutely certain you regret it." The threat was delivered calmly, but no one doubted he meant every word. Charlotte's face had gone pale, then red with humiliation. "You're making a mistake." "No," Harry said simply. "Marrying you would have been a mistake. Marrying Rachel was the best decision I've ever made, even if I've been too broken to fully appreciate it until now." He offered Rachel his arm. "Shall we go home, my dear?" Rachel took his arm, her heart doing something complicated in her chest. As they walked toward the exit, she heard the whispers starting, but this time they were sympathetic to her, admiring even. The Duke of Ashford had publicly declared his loyalty, had chosen his wife over his past, had made absolutely clear where his heart belonged. In the carriage ride home, Harry was silent for a long moment. Then, "I meant every word." Rachel looked at him in the dim light. "Did you?" "Yes." He reached for her hand, and this time she let him take it. "I know I've been a coward. I know I've hurt you repeatedly, because I was afraid of being hurt again. But Rachel, watching Charlotte try to destroy you tonight, seeing the way you stood up to her with such grace and strength, I realized something." "What?" "That I've been so afraid of losing you to betrayal that I've been losing you through my own cowardice." His hand tightened around hers. "And that's worse, so much worse." Rachel felt tears threatening. "Harry, I love you," he said quietly. "I think I have for weeks, maybe longer, but I was too afraid to admit it, even to myself. Too afraid that if I loved you, you'd have the power to destroy me the way Charlotte did. But the truth is, you've had that power all along, and you've never once used it. You've been patient and forgiving, and far kinder than I deserved." A tear slipped down Rachel's cheek. "I love you too, even when you're being impossible, even when you doubt me, even when you make me want to scream in frustration." Harry laughed, the sound rough with emotion. "That's more than I deserve." "Probably," Rachel agreed, but she was smiling. The carriage pulled up to Ashford Hall, but neither of them moved to leave immediately. "Can we start again?" Harry asked quietly. "Not the marriage, we can't undo what's happened, but the way we are with each other. Can we try to build something real, without fear, without walls?" Rachel looked at him, really looked. She saw the vulnerability in his eyes, the genuine hope, the willingness to finally risk his heart. She also saw the man he could be if he let himself, the partner she'd glimpsed in those rare, precious moments when his guard had dropped. "Yes," she said finally. "But Harry, if you doubt me again, if you let fear make you cruel again, I'm done. I won't keep fighting for a marriage where trust is conditional." I understand. He cupped her face gently. And I swear I'll spend the rest of my life proving you can trust me. Not with words, with actions. Every single day. He leaned forward slowly, giving her time to pull away. She didn't. Their kiss was tender, tentative, not the clinical contact of their wedding night, but something real. Something that felt like a promise and a beginning all at once. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing unsteadily, Harry rested his forehead against hers. "Come to bed with me," he whispered. "Not because of duty or heirs or any of that. Just because I want you. Because I love you. Because I'm done pretending I don't." Rachel's breath caught. Yes. They went inside together, hands intertwined, and for the first time since their wedding, Rachel felt like she was truly coming home. What followed was both easier and harder than Rachel had imagined. Harry didn't transform overnight. He still had moments of doubt, still carried scars from Charlotte's betrayal. But now, when fear threatened to make him withdraw, he talked to Rachel instead of retreating. When his instinct was to protect himself through distance, he chose vulnerability instead. And Rachel learned to trust that he was trying, genuinely, consistently trying. Their physical relationship, when it finally developed beyond that first night, was a revelation. Harry was attentive, tender, passionate, in ways that made Rachel understand why people wrote poetry about desire. This was nothing like the clinical encounter of their wedding night. This was partnership, pleasure, connection. This was what marriage should have been from the beginning. The education centre continued to flourish. Harry became genuinely involved, not just as a donor, but as an advocate. He spoke about the project in Parliament, secured additional funding from other peers, helped Rachel expand to 2 more locations across London. They worked together now, true partners, in purpose as well as name. 3 months after Charlotte's final humiliation, Rachel realised she'd missed her monthly courses. She waited another month to be certain before telling Harry. They were in the library after dinner, comfortable in each other's company in a way that still felt new and precious. Harry was reading correspondence while Rachel reviewed applications for the education centre's newest location. "Harry," she said quietly. He looked up immediately, attuned to shifts in her tone in a way he never had been before. "What is it?" "I'm pregnant." The papers in his hand fluttered to the floor, forgotten. We're. He couldn't seem to form a complete sentence. Rachel smiled, suddenly nervous. "Around Christmas, the physician thinks. If all goes well." Harry crossed to her in 3 strides, pulling her into his arms with such careful tenderness it made her throat tight. "This is..." His voice was thick with emotion. "Rachel, this is wonderful, terrifying and wonderful. You're not disappointed?" She had to ask, had to know. "I know on our wedding night, you said." "Forget what I said then," Harry interrupted fiercely. "I was a fool and a coward. This baby isn't just an heir, Rachel. It's proof that we survived everything that tried to break us. That we built something real, despite my best efforts to sabotage it." He dropped to his knees, pressing his forehead against her still flat stomach. "Hello, little one," he whispered. "Your mother is the strongest, most remarkable woman I've ever known. And I promise I'll spend every day of your life showing her that she's valued, that she's loved, that she matters beyond any role or duty." Rachel's tears fell freely now, landing in his dark hair. This was what she'd hoped for on her wedding night. This acknowledgement, this love, this partnership. It had taken months of pain and struggle to reach. But they'd reached it. The pregnancy was both easier and harder than Rachel expected. The physical symptoms were manageable, some nausea, profound exhaustion, emotions that swung wildly between joy and terror. But the weight of creating life, of bringing a child into the world was overwhelming in ways she hadn't anticipated. Harry was devoted to the point of absurdity. He fussed constantly, insisted she rest more than was strictly necessary, read every book on childbirth and infant care he could find. "You're being ridiculous," Rachel said one evening as he arranged pillows behind her back for the third time. "I'm pregnant, not dying." "You're carrying our child," Harry countered. "That makes you precious beyond measure." Despite her protests, Rachel secretly loved his attention. Loved that he cared enough to be overprotective. Loved that this baby was wanted by both of them, not just demanded as duty. The education centre continued to thrive, though Rachel had to reduce her direct involvement as the pregnancy advanced. Harry stepped in seamlessly, bringing his business acumen to fundraising and administration while maintaining the project's original mission. Watching him interact with the students was revelation. He was patient, encouraging, genuinely interested in their progress. The girls adored him, especially when he funded scholarships for the most promising students to continue their education beyond the basic curriculum. "You're good at this," Rachel said one afternoon, after visiting the centre together. "At what?" "Using your power for something meaningful, making a real difference beyond just maintaining status." Harry pulled her close, one hand resting on her rounded belly. "You taught me that. You showed me what's possible when you actually care." The baby kicked against his palm, and Harry's face lit with wonder. "Did you feel that?" "I feel it all the time," Rachel laughed. "Our child is as restless as you are, or as stubborn as you are," Harry countered, but he was smiling. Christmas arrived, cold and bright. Rachel had been confined to bed for the past week, her time drawing near. Harry had barely left her side, sleeping in a chair beside her bed when exhaustion finally claimed him. "You should rest in your own chambers," Rachel said for what felt like the 100th time. "You'll be useless when the baby actually arrives if you're already exhausted." "I'm not leaving you," Harry said firmly. "Not now. Not ever again." The pain started on Christmas Eve, mild at first, then building in intensity. The midwife arrived as darkness fell, calm and efficient. Harry stayed, despite the midwife's suggestion that he wait elsewhere. "This is my wife," he said quietly. "My child. I'm staying." The hours that followed tested Rachel's strength in ways she'd never imagined. The pain was enormous, all-consuming, transformative, but Harry was there through all of it, holding her hand, whispering encouragement, promising it would be over soon, reminding her how strong she was. And then, just after midnight on Christmas morning, a baby's cry filled the room. "A son, Your Grace," the midwife announced, placing the squirming, red-faced infant in Rachel's arms. "A healthy, beautiful son." Rachel looked down at the baby, their baby, and felt her entire universe reorganize itself around this tiny person. He had Harry's nose, her dark hair, and lungs that suggested he'd have no trouble making his presence known. He was perfect. "Hello, Jaden," she whispered, using the name they'd chosen together. "Hello, my darling boy." Harry was crying. She realized tears streaming down his face as he stared at his son. "May I?" His voice was tentative. "Of course." She helped transfer Jaden to Harry's arms, watching as her husband cradled their child with infinite gentleness. "Hello," Harry whispered to the baby. "Hello, little one. I'm your father, and I promise you, you'll never doubt that you're wanted, that you're loved, that you're the best thing I've ever done." Jaden yawned, supremely unimpressed. Rachel laughed through her own tears. "I think he's more interested in food than declarations of love." They sat together in the candlelit room, their son between them, and Rachel thought about how far they'd travelled from that devastating wedding night. From Harry's cruel dismissal to this moment of shared joy. From isolation to partnership. From duty to love. "I'm sorry," Harry said suddenly, his voice thick. for our wedding night, for telling you to disappear, for every moment I made you feel unwanted." "I know," Rachel said softly, "and I forgive you, truly." "You made me a better man," Harry continued. "You refused to accept the version of me that was broken and afraid. You demanded better, and you showed me what better could look like." "We made each other better," Rachel corrected. "That's what love does." Jaden made a small sound, and they both looked down at him with helpless adoration. "Merry Christmas," Harry whispered. "Merry Christmas," Rachel echoed. And for the first time since her wedding day, she felt completely, perfectly at peace. 18 months later, Rachel stood in the garden at Ashford Hall, watching Harry push Jaden's pram along the gravel paths. Their son was awake and gurgling happily, waving tiny fists at passing butterflies. At 14 months old, he was already showing signs of his father's stubbornness and his mother's determination, a combination that promised interesting teenage years ahead. The education centre now had 5 locations across London and expanding into Bristol and Manchester. Over 300 girls were receiving instruction, with a dozen graduates having moved on to employment as governesses, bookkeepers, or household managers. The project had become a model, with other charitable organisations adopting similar approaches. Rachel had hired a director to manage daily operations, allowing her to maintain oversight while focusing on being a mother. But she'd never stepped away completely. This was her legacy, her proof that she could build something meaningful. She'd never been happier. "There you are!" Harry appeared with the pram, Jaden reaching for his mother with a delighted squeal. "Someone wanted to show you the roses." "Did he?" Rachel smiled, scooping her son into her arms. Jaden immediately grabbed a fistful of her hair, tugging with enthusiastic lack of coordination. "What a cultured young gentleman you are." "He gets that from you," Harry said, wrapping an arm around her waist. "The appreciation for beauty. And from you he gets stubbornness and a tendency to wake at impossible hours. That seems fair." Harry kissed her temple, his hand resting on the slight curve of her belly. Another child, due in spring, already making its presence known through morning sickness and exhaustion. "What are you thinking about?" Harry asked, reading her expression with the ease of 18 months of genuine partnership. "About our wedding night," Rachel admitted. "About what you said." Harry's arm tightened around her. "I wish I could take it back. Every word." "I don't," Rachel said quietly. "If you hadn't said it, I wouldn't have fought so hard to prove myself. I wouldn't have discovered my own strength. I wouldn't have built the education centre or learned that I could create power where none was offered. So my being a complete idiot was actually beneficial? Your being an idiot taught us both what we needed to learn." Rachel smiled. "But let's not repeat the experiment." Harry laughed, pulling her closer. Jaden squirmed between them, making happy sounds. "You gave me everything I said I didn't want," Harry murmured. "A real marriage, a real partnership, love." "You gave me back myself," Rachel countered. "The parts I thought I'd have to hide to be a good wife. My ambition, my need to matter, my refusal to be ornamental." They stood together in the afternoon sunlight, their son between them, another child growing, the future bright with possibility. Rachel thought about the girl who'd entered this marriage with cautious hope, who'd had that hope crushed by casual cruelty, who'd chosen to fight rather than disappear. That girl had become a woman, strong, purposeful, loved. And Harry Walker, Duke of Ashford, who'd once thought he could protect himself by keeping his wife at a distance, had learned the hardest lesson of his life, that the woman you try to dismiss will always be the one who changes everything. That real strength isn't found in walls, but in vulnerability. That love without trust is just another form of isolation, and that the best partnerships are forged not in easy moments, but in surviving the hard ones together. "I love you," Harry said against her hair. I love you too, Rachel replied. Even when you're impossible. Jaden chose that moment to grab his father's nose, giggling with delight at the game. Their laughter rang across the garden, the sound of a family, complete and whole and real. Rachel had entered this marriage believing she would disappear. Instead, she'd become unforgettable. Before we end this story, I need you to understand something. Rachel's journey wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about making Harry suffer. It was about refusing to accept being erased, about building power when none was offered, about demanding to be seen, valued, and respected, not as a role, but as a human being. How many of us have been in Rachel's position, told we're temporary, told our value has an expiration date, told to accept less than we deserve and be grateful for it? Rachel said no. And that refusal changed everything. If her story moved you, if you've ever had to fight to matter, to be seen, to prove you were more than convenient, then show it. Like this video. Leave a comment telling me where you're watching from and what moment hit hardest. Subscribe to Duke's Royal Library for more stories about women who refuse to disappear and men who finally learn to see them. Don't let Rachel's story end here. Be part of the community that demands these narratives exist. Hit that subscribe button. You know you want to. This story began with one of the cruelest sentences a husband could speak to his wife. Once the heir is born, you will retire to the country. 7 words that should have destroyed Rachel Mann's future. Instead, they ignited something fiercer than Harry Walker could have imagined. They transformed a dutiful daughter into a formidable duchess. They revealed that the woman he'd tried to dismiss was exactly the woman he needed. But this story was never really about Harry learning his lesson. It was about Rachel learning hers. She learned that love without respect is worthless, that trust is the foundation of any real partnership, that you cannot set yourself on fire to keep someone else warm. Eventually, you'll burn out and they'll just complain about the cold. She learned that the most radical act a woman can commit is refusing to make herself small, refusing to apologize for wanting more, refusing to disappear just because someone found her presence inconvenient. And she learned that true power isn't given, it's built, brick by careful brick, in the spaces where no one thought to look. Rachel gave Harry his heir. She gave him 2 children, actually, and a partnership richer than he'd imagined possible. But she never retired to the country. She never faded into convenient obscurity. She never let herself be forgotten. She transformed Ashford Hall from a museum of ducal history into a home. She changed London society's understanding of what charitable work could accomplish. She proved that women given opportunity could reshape the world. And Harry Walker, who'd once believed he could protect himself by keeping his wife at arm's length, learned that real safety isn't found in isolation. It's found in the terrifying, beautiful vulnerability of letting someone truly know you. Their story reminds us that the best love stories aren't about perfection. They're about people who are broken, finding ways to heal together. About mistakes that get acknowledged and corrected. About choosing each other again and again, especially when it's hard. Because that's the truth about marriage, about partnership, about any relationship worth having. It's not about the beginning, when everything is easy and hopeful. It's about the middle, when things get complicated and painful and you have to decide whether to fight for each other or walk away. Rachel and Harry fought, and they won. Subscribe to see more stories unfold, and comment where you're watching from. I will love to say hello to you, to know how far our story is reaching, to build this community of people who believe women deserve to be more than convenient. This is Duke's Royal Library, where we tell stories about women who refuse to disappear. Thank you for being part of Rachel's journey. Until next time, remember, you are not temporary. You are not disposable. You are not required to make yourself small. to make someone else comfortable. You are, in fact, unforgettable. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise. Thank you, and don't forget to subscribe.